Welcome to the session of 1E9 here at Respond Days. The world still hasn't put the COVID-19 pandemic behind it, and yet it's been a year full of headline-making innovations. In more and more cities, we can have groceries delivered within 10 minutes to our home. Art can now also be sold as NFTs, and 2 billionaires went to space. What a year! But the spirit of optimism that arises in the face of such great news is somewhat dampened by players such as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The IPCC says that we will no longer manage to limit global warming to 2 degrees unless something changes very quickly. And this leads me to the questions: are we, and by we I mean startups, corporations, research institutions, governments, actually producing the innovations we really need to tackle all those global challenges? Or does something go fundamentally wrong here? That's what I want to discuss with 4 great experts from very different backgrounds. Please welcome, to my right, Soňa Stadtelmeyer-Petru. She's the Global Head of Sustainable Investing at Allianz Investment Management and responsible for the development and implementation of ESG strategies in the Allianz Group portfolio of 800 billion euros. That's a lot of money. Great to have you with us, Soňa.
Thank you for the invite. Happy to be here.
Also joining us is Dr. Petra Blumenroth from Bayern Innovativ, where she's the project manager for technology and frugal innovation. She's also involved in technology projects with a focus on sustainability and is committed to the cooperation between Bavarian companies in Africa. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Right next to me is Lydia Neuhuber from Deloitte, where she's the sustainability consulting lead. In this role, she has successfully supported companies in the automotive and other industries in their sustainability transformations. Hi Lydia, thanks for joining us.
Looking forward.
And last but not least, Dr. Jan Breitinger came here today. He leads the Bertelsmann Stiftung project Fostering Innovation. And in this project, he addresses the question of how to design a sustainable innovation policy that is geared to societal needs. Hi, Jan.
Hi, good to be here.
My name is Wolfgang Kerler. I'm co-founder and editor-in-chief of 1E9. 1E9 is a startup from Munich that aims to promote an optimistic discourse about the future and technology and to generate new ideas and partnerships to drive change for the better. We do this with a community platform, with various workshops and events, and with journalism. And now let's go. Of course, our discussion should be primarily about coming up with constructive solutions, but let's rant a bit to start. Which new products, startups, research projects or financing rounds have you recently found to be unnecessary, if not harmful, in the view of these global challenges? You don't have to name them if you don't want to, if you're not allowed to, but a description will be great. Who wants to start with the bad examples? Jan.
You mentioned food delivery in 10 minutes. I think for me it's not too helpful.
So you are not a Gorilla's customer yet?
You name it.
Great. Other ideas? Lydia?
Yeah, maybe when I look at it, I think we have quite a lot of innovations that are not really combined to the usage. So for example, take plastic bags. It's a good example. We changed plastic bags completely in all the supermarkets within paper bags. But the funny thing is, if you don't use your paper bag 4 times in a row, it's not more sustainable than the plastic one. But we didn't change the habit, we just changed the product. And that's probably the innovations where I think we need to really take the full step and not just make a small one and then stop before we really do it.
Not just destroying the world a little bit less, yeah? Soňa?
Yeah, for me, maybe more of an overarching topic and kind of purely from an investment perspective, I do see that I would say every pitch that I see for an investment product has SDGs in it, and when you think then, or it's being sold as super sustainable and impactful, but then you ask questions and you figure out, okay, there's maybe not that much really in terms of impact measurement and management. So I think it would be good, and I know that also from a policy perspective, the EU is working on it, but have a more of a standard and a labeling system to enable, also retail clients, but also institutional clients to really see, okay, is this product, is this investment really, does it generate positive impact or not?
No greenwashing, real facts. Jan?
I find it quite difficult to pick a specific innovation because I think most innovations do have an upside and also a potential downside. It totally depends on the perspective that you have. But maybe to answer with the question, what is necessity? I think this is the question that we need to discuss. And if you ask, well, what do we find necessary or unnecessary? In my opinion, we need more innovations that help us to overcome these grand challenges that we are facing. And when I look at recent innovations, I hardly see it. Very often it's maybe facilitating some processes in daily life, but it does not really help us to solve these challenges. So we have to think about necessity.
Great. This leads me to the next question, because we talked about what we don't want in innovation. Now let's talk about the innovation that we really need now. So what kind of innovation is needed now? In theory, but also as a practical example, whatever you come up with.
I think sorry.
No,
yes.
Go for it.
We have to think about the understanding of innovation, maybe redefine what we mean when we say innovation. And that's quite abstract. Maybe more practical, the way we foster innovation is also a big question, especially or particularly in the public sector. So how do we foster, how do we promote innovation? And a remarkable innovation that I would like to mention here in this context is Sprint, the German Agency for Disruptive Innovations, which was established approximately 2 years ago. And I think that this has been a good step into the right direction, a remarkable innovation within the landscape of innovation policy.
But what would be an innovation that comes out from these efforts? You have to have your favorite innovation.
I think, given the pandemic situation at the moment, homeschooling would be a topic that we need to put more effort in.
Good solutions for homeschooling.
Yes.
Lydia, you look like you already had an idea in your mind.
Well, you introduced me with the automotive industry, so of course I need to come up with mobility concepts right now. I think if we look at the whole industry, it's one of the big drivers of decarbonization. And we already have seen quite a lot happening there, but I personally would really like that we go one step further with the whole circular economy topic and really make sure that we have this car that is fully recycled and where we have batteries that we can work on, that we really have a mobility that is then working for all of us and that we can leverage it. And not only by having our car, but by really having the mobility solutions of the future that are combining different ways to kind of proceed in the future.
Would you say an electric SUV is more like a paper bag, or is it more like the real innovation that we need?
It depends which one you choose, but I hope the one in the future will definitely be the paper bag that is used quite often. Great.
Petra, what are your favorite innovations, or the innovations that you think we need right now?
I'm a lot with the SDGs, so I would like to hear more about clean water, health solutions for everybody, not only in industrialized countries, but all over the world. And I think it's a great effort to get there. So it would be my favorite to see the real big challenges also of other people, not only ours.
So not only innovations for the industrialized world. Soňa.
Yeah, so for me, again, from an investment perspective, I think it would be kind of a two-level solution aspect. So the first one would be to see more climate solutions. So we as Allianz, we have committed to have a net zero portfolio by 2050 with targets that are already broken down into 5-year targets. And so in order to get the portfolio to net zero, we will need a lot of climate solutions. But kind of the issue for us is, as we're usually coming in as investors more on a later stage, so we're not really the VC investor, it means for us that we need to find creative ways of investment vehicles. How can we then invest into, for example, early technologies? And we see for now, and we're already working on a couple of those vehicles, these are blended finance vehicles, so vehicles that kind of bring together public and private money. and de-risk, for example, new technologies. So, really having those vehicles at scale, I think would really help to put, more money into the market and also towards new technologies.
So that's even a financial innovation.
Yes.
Great. So now we know what innovations we need, what innovations we want. Now let's figure out how to get more of them. I know that the Respond Days are primarily about startups, and we also want to talk about their role in this, but startups don't act alone. They operate in an environment shaped by other players, by politicians, by industry, by large corporations, and of course by financial players and investors. Without these actors, there will be no transformation, so we want to talk about these actors too today. And we start with the role of politics. Jan, you've done research on how individual governments promote innovation, and your verdict on the German innovation policy, but also on EU strategy, was not that good. What's going wrong here? Why haven't the innovations that we really need not been promoted so far?
Yeah, that's a big question. And I think we should start with emphasizing that Germany is still an innovative country, and there's also a lot happening in Europe. So we have productive and creative and stable economy. We have outstanding and very creative research institutions, universities, which produce many good ideas and solutions. And also we have a well-equipped research and innovation policy. So this is the upside. So that's happening a lot. But still what we see, and that brings me to your question, is that we do not produce or generate those innovations that we really need. And why is this the case? Because the need itself has changed. So our way of thinking about innovation and the way we foster innovation, that these ways, they stem back to the days of classic industrial policy. So formerly, innovation was a means for economic competitiveness, to enhance competitiveness, to enhance economic prosperity. And this served us for a long time. But now, in the light of all these big challenges, such as the climate change, for example, or mobility, demographic change, and so on, we realize that we cannot solve these problems by using the methods and instruments and policies that have brought us into this situation. So the need itself has changed. We have a different need than we had maybe, some decades ago. And now we are at the point in history where we start to realize that we have to change our understanding. And I think, in a nutshell, innovation nowadays should be regarded and promoted as a means of transforming our society and economy. That's these are the two sides of the coin. Innovation is a means for societal and economic progress. And also a means, and that's now my opinion, it's also a very important means or the key lever for the transformation towards real and comprehensive sustainability. And this does not happen at the moment because we are lacking, and now I come to the weak spots that we will also discuss in our studies recently. We are lacking two things. First is a direction, a clear direction. So what is the ultimate goal of our innovation policy? We have to find an answer to that. That's the topic of, or the theme of directionality. And the second one we could talk about is governance. We need effective and efficient governance institutions that implement our innovation strategy.
You talk about Germany and the EU, but you did look at some other countries that are one step further already. So maybe you could name us some examples of countries with good innovation policies that that we could learn from, because we don't have to reinvent innovation policies.
Yes, I'm happy to do so, and I think that's quite important to mention as well. That there are many good practices out there in the world which we could learn from, instruments that we could potentially adapt and transfer to our context here in Europe and in Germany, particularly. To go back to the two topics that I just mentioned, directionality and good governance. I'd give you an example. What we need are strategies that are built on the needs of us, of the society, of the human being. So what we see right now at the moment here in Germany is that we have an innovation strategy which is called the high-tech strategy, the high-tech strategy. And this name, I think, already tells a lot about our understanding of innovation. This strategy focuses on high technology, which is good and necessary, but it is not built around the human being. It does not put the human being in the center of attention. To give you a good example, a good practice, for example, from Sweden, where the National Innovation Strategy was designed along the SDGs. So it's focusing on real human needs. Another example is Canada, where the National Strategy for the Development of AI, of artificial intelligence, was also based on human needs and was designed on the basis of public participation processes. So the governments and ministries in charge there, what they did, they talked to the people, they listened, and they tried to find out, to figure out, well, what are the core needs in this country and how could AI contribute to this, to the satisfaction of these needs. So in a nutshell, directionality, define a clear strategy based on our values, on our needs, and then define concrete action steps. Super important, not only talking about broader visions, but talking about concrete action steps. And that's what we call a mission right now, like mission-oriented innovation. That's what it's about. So this would be an example for strategies. I could give you another one for good governance institutions.
Sure, go for it.
Then again, Sweden, what we see there is that they established a national innovation agency called Vinnova. In the UK, in the United Kingdom, you find Nesta, which is a private innovation foundation, which was established like in the 90s by the British Parliament. And these agencies, they act as change agents, so to speak. So what they are doing is they bundle, they orchestrate innovation activities, they connect stakeholders which normally do not talk to each other. They start real world labs and test beds. They try to reduce barriers between sectors and also regarding political hierarchies. So they try to stimulate like the whole innovation process and also support the government in defining the ultimate goal of innovation. Now, compared to the German context, we see that innovation policy is situated in two ministries. We have many different research institutes which are dedicating their work to innovation as well. And the problem here is that, well, there's a certain fragmentation, there's silo thinking. So the dots are very often not connected. So like the efforts are not coordinated. And our idea, amongst others, like other players in this field, they also recommend that we should consider to establish such a change agent within the system.
So looking for Swedish or British examples for a new agency. Now that was really I'd say the high level policy, the level that we need there on a transformational level. But let's talk about the role of government and politics in general. Maybe the others want to jump in and say what they think that governments, that politics should contribute now. You have an idea?
Maybe I can give some examples from my daily work, because what we see with a lot of clients that we're working with is that oftentimes regulations are the starting point for transformation. So for example, at the moment we have the European taxonomy coming up, which is the first time that sustainability really has an impact in finance functions. And the surprising thing is we're not just talking with the companies about this taxonomy, but it's rather the starting point for a total rethinking of the CFO, who is suddenly saying, oh, this is a topic that I am responsible for and I need to change something. So it's the trigger that is really driving a full transformation. There's much more than just this regulation. And I think that's what we see with many, many cases, and where politics can have this drive and kind of make this first bump in the right direction to start thinking in a different way and then driving topics forward.
So regulation can also be a driver for innovation. Any other ideas?
Yeah, I think also from an investment perspective, so thinking about net zero and decarbonization, I think it's great, and it was kind of the idea from the beginning to create initiatives, for example, like the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance that we're part of and one of the founding members. There are similar initiatives, for banking, for insurance, for asset management, and I think this is super important to have those initiatives and kind of, from their perspective, following their objectives and their targets, but kind of the overall target is the net zero, so everyone's moving. But therefore, we also need policymakers and regulators to enable and to kind of create a framework where also industry, because we also need the industry to set these targets, specifically the carbon-heavy sector. So they also need to kind of move within a framework where they know, okay, there is security for them, there might be support or not. I mean, that's another question. I mean, carbon pricing is coming, so there are already some factors, and I think they need to be embedded into regulation and policies to really enable a stability of the system, and so that kind of the whole system can move towards decarbonization, as an example.
What do you think about the thing that Jan mentioned, that there's no mission or no vision, I'd say, that the policy sometimes seems to have no direction, maybe other than net zero, which of course is a direction. Do you agree, or do you think there's more vision? Well, we leave it with that. You can choose for yourself. Now let's switch from government, which is very old, institutions, to something that's also very old, especially in Europe. Let's talk about corporations. We just learned that Deloitte is 150 years old, so that's a very long time. So the company had to innovate, and so did others that are still existing. Lydia, you advised the automotive industry on how to become more sustainable. But if you look back at the track record of this industry, the main focus there was on building even bigger and even more powerful cars, all with internal combustion engines. And now these companies shall come up with innovations that make them more sustainable. Are they capable of doing this, or are they still just doing some greenwashing here and there?
Well, when I think back on my history, I could say 10 years ago, it was probably exactly the case as you described it. But when I look at today, I think the question is not shall, it's rather how quick will we be to do that? Because we are there. 10 years ago, nobody would have thought that we're talking about big OEMs being only electric by 2030. This is like feeling tomorrow. And they need to have these innovations today in order to have the cars in 6 to 7 years when they are on the market. So I think the question is not if, the question is how, and how is the future looking like? Because when we look at it, of course, currently we're very much focusing on electric vehicles, but there will probably be more, especially when we look at the truck business and so on. So we have a lot of innovations that will be around the whole engine and whatever is combined with it. But we also have a lot of innovations when we think about how mobility will look like. Right now, living in Munich, I don't need a car by myself, even though I work with OEMs all day long, because I have a network and kind of an opportunity to have a car whenever I need it. And this is how the future will look like. So the interesting part will be how they come up with innovations, not only like a simple app, but actually really thinking this big picture, making sure they step out of their very centric perspective into alliances, into working with many different people, and really make mobility totally new. And also in that one, we are not at the start, we are right in between, and it's super exciting to see how this will continue.
That sounds very optimistic. I think that's great, but maybe you can tell us a bit more about the biggest challenges that those companies are facing, because you mentioned it, like some set dates like 2025 or 2030 to sell the last vehicles with internal combustion engines. That sounds like a difficult task with all the culture and background they have. What are the biggest challenges?
There is quite a lot of challenges, and they're very different from each company to the other. But maybe there are three that you can take out that are very specific when it comes to those topics. The first one is skills. I think we all talk about sustainability now. When you open a newspaper, you read articles about sustainability. But once you start to dig deeper and you really want to understand what does sustainability mean, what does it mean for a specific company, you have quite little people in these organizations who really know. And it's really tough to get highly talented people to come to your company and to work on that because the market is just too little. So skills is something that is really important. Once you have those skills, the next thing is profitability. When we talk about sustainability, we always say, oh, this is green, this is something good that we do. But big corporations, they need to make money. And I think the important thing is then to combine those two and to make sure that some of the innovations are not stopped right at the beginning just because they say we don't see the cash flow yet, but rather let them grow and understand that tomorrow's business will be totally different and manage a way to measure it, as you mentioned it before, and make sure that this is then really considerate. And last but not least, also sustainable innovations are innovations. And when we look at the big corporates, it's just sometimes a bit more difficult for them to really drive innovation because they have well-established processes, quite a lot of governance. So also in that situation, they need to leverage the knowledge that they built with all other innovations during the last couple of years to make sure that there is speed and that real disruptive thoughts will be developed at the end.
But sometimes maybe that doesn't work within the organization. So maybe we can all think about the role that startups could play because many people watching out there come from the startup scene. So what role do you see for startups in helping those corporations innovate?
Well, I'll come back to the challenges because they describe it. Skills, if you work with a startup that is specifically focused on sustainability, this is how you can help because they get the knowledge and they bring it into their company. Profitability, if you work together with startups, it's less risky because it's not your big brand that is working on, but you can actually exchange with them and experience new things. And last but not least, innovations. I think startups just come up with great ideas. You want them in your company, so you try to engage with them and really make things happening.
What do you other think about the role that startups should play?
Yeah, I think there should be more cooperation together with SMEs and maybe also with multinationals to join, to create a synergy between those things that startups can do better and to find those like established structures in SMEs that could help startups to be more successful, and I think the synergy is what brings more value to innovation.
It's great that you mentioned SMEs, small and medium-sized companies, because we tend to talk only about startups and big corporations, but especially in Europe, there's a huge sector in between that we shouldn't forget. So you already talked about the challenges of being innovative within an organization, be it a small one or a big one, because to be honest, not all startups are really innovative. Some startups are maybe just another version of startups that already exist. So let's talk about how we can innovate, maybe better, different than before. That's your focal point, Petra. Your specialty is frugal innovation. Before we come to this term, let's look at what the innovations that corporations, SMEs do now, because you know that in industrialized countries in particular, there's often some kind of over-engineering instead of real innovation. Could you explain what you mean by that and what and why that might be?
Yeah, Jan also already mentioned that I think Germany is especially focused on high tech. So, and it's not only high tech that brings good innovation. And we have this German ingenuity, this engineers that are that they want to do everything that is possible. Maybe not what is helpful or what is really needed, but if anything goes, then everything has to be developed. So, and sometimes I guess it's easier or to make it more easy for the consumer to have less functions, less knickknacks, just to focus on what I really need as a customer. Maybe I don't want 15 programs in my washing machine or a tablet or a mobile with, I don't know, maybe some people only need a mobile for giving a call or set the alarm in the morning. So yeah, it's all about reduced but clever solutions.
So you say there's too much focus on new features and new gimmicks that are not really necessary. And I agree with the washing machine, because basically you only use like two of those programs. Now a counter concept to this kind of over-engineering, focusing on adding even more to something that's actually already running, is frugal innovation. I guess many out there are familiar with the concept, because in the recent years there has been some kind of discussion about it, but perhaps not all. So maybe you can explain to us, what is frugal innovation and where does it come from?
Maybe I start with the latter question. Frugal innovation comes from India, where there is a special Hindi word for, it's named Yugad, which means necessity is the mother of innovation. So Not macht erfinderisch in German. So if you only have limited access to resources, limited money, so then you think about, what can I do with the things I have, and what is my need at the moment. So and this is in scarce resources, of course. So the main thing of frugal innovation is do more with less, like I already said, limit function and so on, and to add a value for the customer, not think about a product that I would like to design in a very fancy way, but to think what is the need of my customer. So more customer-centered design, and this of course brings you to think in another way. You think about the problem first, not to think first of the solution. So, and there's an acronym for frugal, where the F stands for functionality. It's a good functionality that has to be done with frugal innovation. And the R stands for robust. The less functionalities and the less knobs and whatever you have, the more robust, the more you don't have to maintenance it too strongly. The U stands for user-friendly, which of course, if I look at what my customer or my prosumer needs, then I know where's the pain points and where's the sweet points. The G stands for growing, means scalable. Of course, a company that does frugal innovation would also like to make some money. So you have to think about, is it scalable? Where can I have the growing of this innovation? And of course, like I mentioned already, the A stands for affordable. So it's all about the affordable excellence you give to your new consumers. And the L stands for local, meaning what kind of material I have in this local place, what people are there, what culture is there. So this is all together, all criteria that describe frugal.
That maybe might sound to some as, okay, let's all go low tech and go back to ancient times where we just had regular cell phones. But that's not the case. Maybe you have some examples for frugal innovation.
Yeah, of course. As I already mentioned, like the local and the culture and so on. Frugal has its origins more in the developing and emerging countries, where there are really needs. Like in industrial countries, okay, we are kind of saturated with nearly everything. So, but if you go to developing countries, there are some genuine needs. And like, for example, a textile baby warmer instead of an incubator for premature children. It's like a sleeping bag. And you can even take the children and hold it instead of being in a box. So, and there's a from Stanford University, they developed this baby warmer. Of course, we have, like you had in your article, new mobility concepts, like looking like cars, but having a photovoltaic roof on top, or electric motor. And what can I tell?
So electric vehicle or electric, the engine is actually frugal, right? Because it less parts, is more robust.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, one last thing: why should Western industrialized companies, think about frugal innovations? They have resources, they have materials, they can import anything.
Yeah, but if you look at ships being stuck in the Suez Canal, then then you suddenly don't have resources. And we know that for some like mobiles, we need this seltene Erden, which is a problem. Of course, like I would like to summarize that there are many intersections with green tech, with circular economy, with sharing economy, if you look at frugal innovations. So, and industrialized countries, they have another problem as well. They have aging society. So those people, they have really special needs. And to address those needs, there are some innovations to be done. And like frugal innovations, like maybe these alarms where there's only one button to call the ambulance or family members. And I think what is the case for emerging markets, that you have those needs to be fulfilled, like water, sanitation, and so on. So it's sustainability for industrialized countries and special needs for special consumers. So, and there's also some reverse innovation, like being developed for emerging markets, but coming back to industrialized countries, because you see it's functioning, it's working, and it's enough for this special situation, like remote medical help or small medical devices that you can just put in your pocket and go to the people. Like you can use these gadgets also on an emergency car or ambulance to make a first examination, and then say, okay, yes or no. Do we need another more precise examination? So I think there's other examples as well.
So it does make sense to change the way of thinking about what the engineers could do.
Absolutely. It's to innovate in a frugal style. You need to change your mindset, of course. You need to change thinking. As I said already, you have to focus on the problem first, and not on the solution. So, and there are some ways of doing so. Like design thinking is a method that is very common. Meanwhile, and they will start by looking at where's the pain points, what do people really want. And then you have this iterate process where you make a prototype and then come again and say, show me how you use it. And people say, well, I don't like it. I don't want to use it. I need this, and that. So it's really a change of mindset and of thinking. Yeah.
Great, but in the end, someone has to pay for it, and that leads us to you, Soňa. You have to invest, well, your employer has to invest 800 billion euros. So that's quite a responsibility. And you have to make sure, or you want to make sure that those investments are sustainable, that those foster the right innovation that we just heard of. How do you make sure that your investments are sustainable? Because I guess you can just say, okay, let's start to only invest in green startups because there are not enough startups for 800 billion euros. So how do you do your investment and determine which is sustainable or sustainable enough or not?
Yeah, so I think one point is to, when we match our liabilities from the insurance products, you have on the one hand life insurance products, and kind of the bigger part of the portfolio is coming from the life insurance products, which gives us really the possibility to invest long term. And I think this is a very crucial point, which allows us also to do investments where, to a certain degree, probably we can also wait because we're invested for such a long time. But on the other hand, we need to make sure that we're making investments that also in 20 or 30 years' time, are still a good investment. So it's on the one hand a challenge, but it's also, I think, an opportunity for us being a long-term investor. If you look at our portfolio, obviously the biggest part of the portfolio is fixed income or debt. Then there is a smaller part of equity. Then we have real estate, we have cash. But I would say roughly 85%, actually 86%, is really in debt and fixed income. And we're investing, I would say, since more than 10 years. We're really thinking, how can we make sure that the investments are more and more sustainable? And we started off because we came from a risk perspective to the investment. So we wanted to make sure that the risks that are, could be ESG risks and are associated with the investments, that these are mitigated because we are invested usually for a very long time. So we kind of, started thinking about sustainability and ESG really from a risk perspective. So, we have some exclusions in our portfolio, but I really have to say that this is kind of a last resort. So we're not really a big friend of saying, for example, how do we want to achieve a net zero portfolio? It's definitely not that we just, gonna sell everything that is carbon heavy and try to invest into green only. But we really strongly believe in transition of industries, of sectors, etc. So we kind of started from the risk perspective and then added, various approaches to how we approach specific asset classes, for example. So we kind of start off looking also at the asset managers that invest the money for us. We want to make sure that they have ESG and sustainability aspects really integrated in their, how they invest our money. Is it really kind of in the spirit that we would like the money to be invested? Then, as said, we have certain exclusions. These are, I would say, mainly things that are really a no-go for us. And then we have, specific approaches. On the one hand, it's an ESG scoring for the listed assets, where we can kind of, really have a look into the portfolio to an issuer level, so to a company level, and we're using data that shows us, what is the ESG score, what is it based on, which areas may be a bit risky, or where is the company maybe not that good in terms of an ESG performance. And then on the non-listed assets, we have an internal referral process. So whenever we invest into, for example, infrastructure or areas, that might be kind of tricky from an ESG perspective, so where there might be risks, we kind of go really deep and want to understand, is the fund manager, asset manager really aware of the risks? Do they have tools in place, to mitigate certain risks? But then really moving, I would say, towards more of the opportunities. So this is also kind of, since the last 10 years, 10 plus years, we've really moved also and kind of enlarged the focus purely from the risk perspective towards the opportunities as well, because you also need to look at the opportunities. And so, thinking about engagement, for example, so we really, as a company, engage with other companies where we see potential risks, but it could be also on the opportunity side to kind of enhance the opportunities that we're seeing.
How do you do that? Do you actively approach the companies to the investment and push them towards more sustainability, the right innovations, or is it more subtle?
I think it's really more about starting the dialogue. So, we don't like coming in and kind of telling everyone what to do, because basically they're the ones, in the sectors, they know better what is possible and what can be done. But really starting the dialogue and obviously, telling them this is our expectation and we need to see and we want to see from you, for example, with a net zero target, do you have one? How do you want to move towards this target? What are the steps? So for us, it doesn't mean that everything needs to be in place now or that the investments need to be green now, but we need to see a way, how can we get there that they really decarbonize? So this is kind of the engagement part. And then we're also having a part of the portfolio kind of end of last year, it was at 40 billion, where we have something like a sustainability themed investments. These are investments, usually renewables, for example, where we see really the positive impact. We don't really call them impact investments, but it's really more around where are the positive outcomes that we want to see. And this is also part of the portfolio, but we also have other parts of the portfolio that still need to get there. And we're trying to actively really engage with the companies, not only the companies, also asset managers, policymakers, or within initiatives to really move the market towards more sustainability.
Now, we talked about all your levels of expertise. We found out that governments need a clear goal where they want to lead society to, and then think about the right policy mix to do it. Corporates are actively changing, and they set their goals, and now their climate goals, and now they find out that they actually have to reach them. Finance is pushing this transformation too, and we learned that maybe many companies need a kind of a mind shift, a different thinking to actually become more sustainable. Now, we are not there, not yet, so maybe each of you can tell me what do you think is the most urgent thing right now? What should be, now if you became the next German Chancellor, what would be the thing that you say, okay, we have to do this right now, or the sector I'm in has to do this right now, because we have to start somewhere?
I would make it very simple. Find investments to drive the topics forward.
For me, it would be, again, speaking about net zero and decarbonization, not having this, I think it's, well, on the one hand, I think it's important to have, for example, the 2050 target, but it's a very long-term target. But really break it down into, smaller pieces and bits. And like we did, we have a 5-year target now. And I think, this is relevant for all the investors. This is relevant also for all the companies to have this target, first of all, but really starting to have an idea, how do you want to get there? And I think you can only see how you want to get there if you break it down into smaller steps and deliver on those steps. So I think this would be important, on the one hand, to have the long-term target, but you also have shorter-term targets and kind of be committed to them and be judged on them if you reach them or not.
I think we need some fundamental changes within our innovation landscape. But one first step, a rather easy step, could be to internalize costs. Our prices of products, of services, they do have to reflect the real costs. And at the moment, we see that very often these costs regarding carbon emissions, for example, they are externalized. So you buy a product or a service and you don't really pay for what you are consuming. And within this framework, the market cannot work well because the market works within its boundaries. And at the moment, you are not rewarded if you price your products in the real way. So we need more transparency about what the things are actually costing us.
Mm-hmm. I would foster technologies in the neo-ecology direction, like green tech, sharing economy, post-carbon society or economy, to get more innovations that lead us to the SDGs.
Yeah, for those of you who didn't recognize it, right behind me, that's the SDGs. And now, how optimistic are you that we really make this transition, that it actually works out? But the idea I get is that the biggest, regulation and money might be the things that drive change. And do drive change, of course. All inspirational stuff is great, but in the end, it's probably regulations and money. But how optimistic are you that we actually make it? Because time is running. Sonia, what do you think?
I mean, we have to make it. That's that's the point. So I think therefore it's really important that everyone in kind of their area of expertise, in their kind of objectives, really integrate sustainability targets and really think about also the prices. I think it will help to have a price on carbon, for example, because then probably more companies will think about what is it actually that I'm doing and how can I do it better, because otherwise it's then too costly for them. So I think it's really about high time that each and every market player thinks about sustainability and how can it be integrated in his or her business model and area, and then drive sustainability forward.
Any other views? Anyone pessimistic here, or do we all agree?
I think it's high time, it's very urgent to act and not only to respond, but also to actively shape. And what makes me slightly optimistic is that first, we have all the things we need at hand. Like we have expertise, knowledge, information. We have identified like the key issues, and now the only thing we need to do is to do something, right? And in this context, I see a growing consensus, a growing agreement on the need for transformation. And I would agree, like there are many areas, many sectors in which a lot of things are going on. And what we do have to do now is that we also connect these areas, these sectors, and that we really shape alliances and collaborate.
Absolutely, I can just agree, because I think the big thing is that there is a total mind shift going on. So you called it greenwashing a few minutes ago, but when we think back a few years...
No, I asked if it's greenwashing.
It was a few years ago when people were talking about sustainability, and it felt a little bit like someone from a marketing team is talking with you, but it's not really the person in charge. And I think nowadays, when we look at the leading managers, it's an issue for them. And especially when we look at the employees working on those projects, they want to make an impact. And I think the companies that can give their employees the feeling that they can really make an impact with what they are doing, they will be the ones getting the top talents on the market. And those are also the ones that are then successful at the end and will be the one driving the change.
I think also open innovation is becoming more and more popular. As you mentioned, we have everything to do the right things. And if we also share our ideas and work together with, for example, open innovation, I think we could make it, I hope.
Great. And now I hope that you saw that we try to bring together many different actors that play a role, government agencies, research and non-profits, corporates, finance, and all of you out there, please do do the things that you can do to foster this change and this transformation that we really need. And that's it. That was the session of 1E9 at the Respond Days. Thank you so much, Sonia, Petra, Lydia, and Jan, for joining us and sharing your expertise. And if you found this discussion interesting, you should make a note for November 23rd to 25, when there's the 1E9 conference happening here in Munich, also with the team of Respond. And now have fun with the rest of the program. Bye-bye. See you next time.